By royal access denied. Blaze on them. Let me lead you. Midnight Phantasm.
Hey guys, welcome back to another Genshin pack guide. Today we'll be focusing on how to build support GANYU. She's a very versatile character that can fit into almost any team comp, and having her on your team will definitely increase your team's total damage output. We'll go over how to use her talents as support, her best weapons, artifacts, team comps, and more. But before we get started, I would like to say that I'm doing my best to at least hit 10k subscribers on this channel, so please make sure to like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate your support. Also catch me live on Twitch at twitch.tv/FrenchTutor_. I'll be streaming there almost every day. So yeah, let's get started. GANYU is a charge shot based bow user, but as a support unit, you'll be mainly focused on using her elemental skill and her elemental burst, and leaving the field as soon as possible. Let's quickly go over each skill and learn how to use them as support. GANYU's charge shot has 2 levels. At a level 2 charge, it shoots a cryo-infused arrow that scatters into AoE damage. You also don't need to hit the enemies precisely for the AoE damage to work, which makes it a little more mobile and console user friendly as support GANYU. One way to use her charge shot is to shoot an arrow from a distance before fighting to apply cryo early to get an elemental reaction. Another way to use this is to shoot an arrow while waiting for energy particles to charge her burst. You can see here I'll use her elemental skill to gain particles, but if I switch out here, I won't get as much energy and won't get my burst back up. If I stay in, I can maximize my energy recharge and use my burst right away without having to swap back in. Her elemental skill leaves an ice lotus behind that taunts and attracts enemies toward it, while GANYU dashes away. The initial summon deals AoE cryo damage and gains 2 elemental particles. After a certain amount of time, or if it is destroyed, it will explode and deal more AoE damage, and you gain another 2 elemental particles. This is one of her best ways to apply cryo onto enemies quickly and your main way to recharge your burst. One way to use this is for protection and repositioning for characters like Fischl, like this, and for Mona as well. Now her most important skill as support is her elemental burst. GANYU summons 50 icicles in a large circle that deal AoE damage and last for 15 seconds, with a 15-second cooldown that requires 60 energy. The less enemies there are, the more randomized the icicles. The icicles will also stagger certain enemies, making them flinch and unable to attack. After you unlock her second passive talent, any characters, including GANYU, standing inside the circle will gain a 20% cryo damage bonus. You always want consistent uptime for this skill, so energy recharge will be crucial. It does insane damage and applies cryo fairly well onto enemies. You can take advantage of superconduct, freeze, and decent melt reactions. It also increases your team's total damage output and really helps any DPS units who struggle against multiple enemies. So you want to prioritize leveling her elemental burst first, and then her elemental skill, and depending on your playstyle and whether you have enough resources or not, you can level her charge attack as well. For weapons, I would recommend bows with energy recharge like the Sacrificial Bow and the Favonius Warbow. After doing some tests with around 200% energy recharge, they have similar energy recharge rates, and I was able to get my burst back up fairly quickly with both bows. If you want a little more damage on your burst, I would recommend the Sacrificial Bow as it has a higher base attack. I also recommend Sacrificial if you have her Constellation 2 unlocked for more elemental particles. If you want to do the most damage on your burst, and you have a good amount of energy recharge, I would recommend the Skyward Harp and the Amos Bow, as the 5-star bows have a really high base attack. Both of these bows will outdamage the Stringless. Okay, and here's a quick damage comparison between a Refinement 4 Stringless and the Amos Bow. And no worries if you don't have those. The Blackcliff Warbow in the Star Glitter shop, the Craftable Bow Prototype Crescent, and the Battle Pass Bow all do pretty well. And with the Blackcliff and Prototype Crescent passives activated and some refinements, they can even outdamage even the 5-star bows for her burst. Now for our artifacts. For late game, hands down, 2-piece Blizzard Strayer and 2-piece Noblesse is her best support set. It just would be a waste not to optimize her burst damage. You have the option of a 4-piece Noblesse set, but her burst damage will decrease by a lot, so I don't recommend it. For the main stats, for the Hourglass, you want attack percent or energy recharge, whichever you need more. Cryo damage bonus on your goblet, and either crit rate or crit damage on your headpiece. Just keep in mind the 1:2 golden ratio of crit rate to crit damage. For substats, prioritize crit damage, crit rate, attack percent, and also energy recharge. For early mid-game, I would recommend 2-piece Exile or 2-piece Scholar for the 20% energy recharge, and something like the Sojourners, Braveheart, or Gladiators for the plus 18 attack bonus. And then from here, you can decide if you want your Hourglass to be attack percent or energy recharge based on what you need. I would say this is pretty balanced for her since you want her burst to be strong and you want some energy recharge, but you can go 2 directions from here as well. You also have the option to do 2-piece Exile and 2-piece Scholar for the energy recharge, but you definitely need an attack timepiece. If you want a little more damage on your burst and your other skills, you can also do a 2-piece 18% attack bonus set and also a 2-piece Berserkers for the 12% crit rate. This is pretty okay for like early and mid game. Another support early and mid game set would be the 4-piece Instructor. If your team does a lot of elemental reactions, especially melt, then this would be pretty decent. The most important main stat for early and mid game would be cryo damage bonus on the goblet. If you really can't find one, then attack percent is okay, but try your best to find a cryo damage bonus cup. For the timepiece, energy recharge and attack would be good. And for the hat, it could be either crit rate, crit damage, or even attack percent is fine early mid game. And for substats, for early mid game, you really don't have to worry, but again, you can do crit damage, crit rate, attack percent, and energy recharge. Now let's do some team comps and team building. Let's start with Superconduct Teams because most cryo characters fit into these teams, but GANYU is just more overpowered in them. I would say she supports Fischl very well on this team. So you get the Superconduct, and Fischl's physical damage arrows will do more damage, and then Xingqiu can freeze with GANYU, and his ult will fire off from her auto attacks, and then you would have animal support with crowd control and healing right here. You can also swap out Xingqiu for like pyro support, and Xinyan's shield can also give a 15% physical damage bonus to Fischl as well, and then GANYU and Xinyan can work together too. If you build up Xinyan's ult, it will do a lot of damage with melt, and also with Superconduct, her physical damage on her ult will do a lot as well. So this is another team idea with Fischl. Some things you can do are doing Fischl's Oz AoE, dash back with GANYU's elemental skill while setting up Superconduct, and then start firing from a distance. GANYU can also support Razor very well, especially if he's using the new Dragon Spine Snow Tomb Claymore. I believe she can optimize that weapon for a DPS unit. I did make a video about it if you want to check it out, the link is in the description down below. And also with Superconduct activated, you can also use Xinyan using Melt with GANYU, and the physical damage on her ult will do a lot as well, as mentioned before. So set up here, you can get Xinyan's physical damage bonus with her shield, and then I use GANYU's ult to get the cryo passive off on the Snow Tomb, and then just go crazy with Razor. Another team idea is with physical Keqing. To optimally use Superconduct, you want to pair it with Freeze so that Keqing can spam charge attacks and frozen enemies can't go flying away. Then it can heal and buff, and if you need some crowd control, you can swap him out with Jean. Here's one setup you can do with this team. You can use Keqing's ult here to apply Electro to everyone, and then use GANYU's ult and get Superconduct, and then activate Xingqiu's Q, and then pretty much put them in place and just charge spam attack, and hits right through their shields. Now let's do some freeze teams with Hydro DPS units. So this is a team with Child, and they actually work very well together. So even if you build both of them, that actually be great if they can both be DPS. But in this case, GANYU would just support with Cryo so that Child can do almost perma freezes. Usually I would have like Fischl or even C2 Barbara or C2 Xingqiu to support this slot, but in this case with the freezes I can just spam his charge attacks and enemies won't go flying away, so I feel like it works pretty well with him. I think this team is kind of broken. And then you have the traditional Sucrose for crowd control, transfer Elemental Mastery to Child so that he can vaporize with Bennett, and Bennett again heals and buffs. Pretty straightforward, just use GANYU's ult here, and then it's just permafreeze, and I can just spam Child's charge attack and the enemies won't go flying away. Another freeze team is with DPS Mona. They also work very well together if you build them up both, so keep that in mind. Pretty much it's just a lot of freezing and a lot of ult spamming in this case, joined in with Sucrose, so you gotta pair her with like Sacrificial Fragments or maybe Favonius Codex, and then Diona is gonna pretty much just charge up GANYU's ult, and yeah, that's pretty much it. It's kind of like a quick swap team where you spam ults and stuff, and then Mona would do most of the auto attacks here. Or you can swap out Sucrose for Venti and there'll be more chaos. Now for Cryo Teams, I believe this is more of a future concept because I don't think GANYU can fully support any cryo carry right now, but she has the capabilities, and let me show you why. First, GANYU's second passive talent gives a 20% cryo damage bonus to active party members within her elemental burst. But let's take a look at the team on hand. GANYU will provide the cryo damage buff of her burst, and if you have Constellation 1, she can reduce the enemy's cryo resistance. For Chongyun, and with Chongyun's Constellation 2, he can reduce GANYU's burst cooldown by 15%, meaning you can have 100% uptime on her ult. Honestly, GANYU really helps out Chongyun, not with the cryo damage bonuses, but from the damage from her ult. You can use Sucrose to lower the cryo resistance even further, and use Bennett to provide melt, buffs, and heals. I normally run Chongyun with Xingqiu because Chongyun needs some protection from interruption with Xingqiu's water swords and freeze, but GANYU's staggering effect on her ult helps a lot too. You can also run this team with freeze and Jean to lower enemies' cryo resistance, and crowd control and her heals. And finally, you have the classic meta pyro carry team with Diluc or Klee. You pretty much want Venti's burst up at all times to swirl in cryo with GANYU, and Diluc can just melt away. Bennett can provide the buffs and heals. And as you can see here, this absolutely breaks the game. Finally, let's talk about our best constellations for support. C1 is good for Cryo Teams if she hits enemies with a charge shot to lower their cryo resistance. It also gives her 2 energy so that she can get back her ult faster. Constellation 2 is okay and provides her with another elemental skill charge for more energy recharge, but I don't think it's worth going for if you're not a whale. And for support GANYU, yeah, I don't think it's worth it. Her best support constellation, and maybe her best constellation in general, would be Constellation 4. So opponents standing within her burst will take increased damage. It starts with 5% and then increases by 5% every 3 seconds, and a maximum of 25% more damage taken. And this effect lingers for 3 seconds after the opponent leaves the AoE. And this is absolutely broken. If you ever get this, it would be crazy. So that's it for this video. GANYU is amazing whether you play her as support or DPS, and she fits into almost any team. Definitely one of the best 5 stars. I'll also be making a GANYU DPS guide, so stay tuned for that. Thanks so much for watching. Take care now.